everybody, and welcome to Mad Realm's Vote to Kick. I'm your host, Jim, also known as Malthanis, and with me, his name is John, otherwise known as Dayo, around the X Bend, and he's got a fantastic show for, wrong intro.
That's my intro. You give that back.
My good friend Dayo from the Talking Script podcast. How you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you? Ready to win. Representing the red. Look, I styled. I'm all together here.
You're themed today. Okay.
Yeah, I'm coming prepared.
So before we get on to our topic of the lone MMO player for this evening, let's talk about the poll from last week. So as you can see from the pie chart, and Mac, if you're listening, I'm sorry that we're still using pie charts.
I'm not.
I know you're not. We had 14 votes in the keep or kick for subscriptions in gaming, and it was 64.3% in favor of kicking subscriptions as a business model for gaming, which I can't say I'm super surprised by.
We will let the industry know, and they will go make the proper preparations.
You know, they'll no more subscriptions because of the 14 votes on our show.
Yep. It's been decided.
Yep. So while I go ahead and prep the form up for our next round of stuff, Dayo, do you want to? So hold on. Let me preface this. So our topic this week is the lone MMO player. So the person who never groups, or not necessarily the person who never groups, but content that is designed for the lone MMO player. Someone who doesn't have to group, doesn't really want to group, can just go through the game and do a lot of stuff without actually ever having to group. And I will be arguing keep on this front, and Dayo's going to be arguing kick. So while I go ahead and prep the form up for tonight's vote, Dayo, you want to go ahead and take it away?
Sure. I mean, in the case of I want to kick, so get rid of not all of solo play, because I understand that it's like if you create a character, like even EverQuest that was predominantly, and like Ultima Online that was predominantly you needed a group type thing, you could go out there and kill one thing, which would technically be solo content. So I'm not talking about couldn't kill a thing, because that would just be kind of impossible. But I'm talking about maybe going back to more of that emphasis that we've had in Ultima Online or EverQuest that we have slipped away from, of trying to do more group content in MMOs. So, because I think everybody can agree that, all the new modern MMOs, it's like they have to have a single player campaign, and it also feels like that's usually the dominant thing is the single player, the main story, which is normally able to be done single player by one person. So,
so to kind of quantify it, say, like Living Story for Guild Wars 2.
Yes. Or I think like even in WoW, the majority of the stuff is doing the quest through the zones that maybe a handful, I don't even know about anymore, can be done solo. I'm sure at the end of each quest, like I'm taking my knowledge from kind of Wrath of the Lich King and after that, but
there were group quests from time to time, but
yeah, usually kind of at the very end of a quest line, but it was like the majority of it. So like 90% of the quest line was soloable, which it's like, I don't know if you go back, like I said, to EverQuest or Ultima Online, people talked about Ultima Online, like you could get killed just by walking outside the town. Like you needed a group.
Okay, so that you've quantified that. So are you going to argue? So what exactly are you wanting to kick for single player stuff?
Well, basically just not having such a strong focus in an MMO, because it's an massively multiplayer online, whatever role playing game.
Okay, so you're positing that you're getting into this in the first place, you're choosing to be in an online system where there are other people.
So why aren't you playing with the other people?
Right, you should have to interact with them in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, you know, if you want that loans experience, you could, like, if you're playing an MMORPG, you could play an RPG that would have that solo experience. And it seems like that's what a lot of the companies do. Like, I mean, when we talk, like, going back to what you were saying about Guild Wars 2, when we talk about that, and it's like, oh, well, you're the commander, we have to take that knowledge and, like, we clearly don't have in the real overworld, I don't know what you want to call it, like the open world. Um, we don't have however many players are playing, let's just say a million. We don't have a million commanders. We take that and assume that that's not the case, which it's like, but it is for the single player. So it's just, it's even incongruent within its own games, and that's been a problem with SWOTOR. It's been, I mean, kind of somewhat of a problem with WoW. I still remember, like, the cutscenes of, oh, you killed Arthas. Spoiler for Wrath of the Lich King.
I don't think you can spoil that at this point, Dayo.
But it's like, the cutscene, I think it eventually put a statue, like a trophy or something, just saying, the general heroes. Well, it's like, my guild never made it to there. Why am I getting credit for it? It's like,
it's everyone. You are the commander, but every person is the commander.
yes.
Kind of stuff. So it's the incongruency between the general state of play versus the instanced off stuff where you are the only person.
Mm-hmm. So
Okay.
it's because we're trying to focus on that single player story that, does sell. But I think that's another problem with MMOs in general, is they try to be everything, and maybe some don't achieve anything because they're trying to be everything.
Okay, so
But that's another.
so for the, at least in a narrative sense, you think it would be better for MMOs to kind of ditch the single player narrative aspect and actually try and craft a narrative that actually treats everybody like an individual in the world.
Yeah, it's like, it's kind of funny. Like, now I'm thinking about it, is, people are like, oh, they always, everybody wants to be that special, unique character that's the leader of, leader of the pack, leader, the one that, heads the charge and all that stuff. But, and they always try that in MMO, of having that single player experience that negates every other character. Whereas now I was thinking about it, in Fable, you live in a world, it's a single player game, but you live in a world where there are loads of heroes. Like, it's like, why do we have single player games that could have that MMO story, where we have MMO stories that are trying to be that single player experience? So it's like, I don't know, there's just a lot of backwardsness.
Okay. So my counter to keep is now the thing that predicated this, Dayo sent me a GDC video about the loner in gaming, and it's a fantastic talk. I'll link it in the YouTube description. See if I can't grab it for.
I might have it here if
Oh,
you
you
want to
got
just
it.
keep focusing
Okay.
on yours.
Dale put the YouTube link in chat, but in order to be alone, you must first have other people, and that's something that was stated in the GDC talk. Um, that's a definitely a point, because in a single player game, you're not necessarily alone because there was never anyone else there to begin with.
Well, but that's almost breaking that immersion line, is it not? I mean, you are in a world with other people. It's just you're the special snowflake that saves the world. Does it have to be an actual person? I mean,
Well, what do you mean by actual person?
well, I think they're, I mean, uh with that discussion there, they're, I think they're insinuating that it you can only be a loner with other people. But if you're talking about in the story itself, can't you still be that loner in the story and achieve that role that you want to achieve in the single player?
Right, but at that particular point, it's not a choice, it's a narrative hook given to you by the people who crafted the game. Which I'm not saying is a bad thing, because that's, like writing a book, a movie, a TV series, a play. You're crafting a narrative.
Mhm.
Um, the thing that with being a loner in an MMO is you are choosing to be alone but near other people. There are numerous points in time where Chris and I, my wife and I, will just we'll go to the mall to walk. We're not like the mall power walkers, but it's kind of like, okay, we can, go out and be in society for a little bit. And it's kind of invigorating in a way because we're both definitely introverts. So we're not, really great with huge crowds of people. And one of the big problems we have is during the summer when all the kids are out of school, there's just a crap ton of people and it's not as nice of a walk as it normally would be. So it can get really exhausting really fast, but that's the other thing is you can choose to be alone but in the crowd and you like that position. So
Okay.
being adjacent to people doing things you can be happy with. And
But
that's
I like that you're saying being adjacent with two people is, do you consider that multiplayer? Like, would you consider that multiplayer of doing things next to an individual? Because
technically yes, because they're affecting the world as much as I am. So, for example, I would consider going to Guild Wars 2 because that's where most of our MMO experience recently is. Um, Being adjacent to other people, you could be doing events in the game, and because other people are there doing things, you're not really doing it with them because you're not grouped or anything, but you're still doing the same thing. You are working towards a goal technically together, but not in a like multiplayer way. It's not organized.
but
So
but like you're saying, it's not in a multiplayer way. So it's this weird middle ground of it's still a solo player experience. I mean, I remember people saying half the time when they were running through Guild Wars 2, they weren't realizing, oh, that was an NPC that was running by with like set dialogue, and then there was a player character. I guess nowadays it's a little bit more obvious to tell because more than likely they have a mount and wings.
lots
But
of particle effects, yeah.
yes, but I because I find it kind of interesting when you're saying the playing adjacent to them, because it did start to make me think, and I actually went and looked it up. Was it kind of goes back to kind of when we grow up, there's these stages of play, and one is basically called parallel play, where you might be playing alongside the person but you're not really interacting. You're both playing your own separate thing just next to each other. So a lot of times it looks like, kind of this co-op or playing together, but you're not in reality doing that.
Yeah,
Which
part. I feel like I'm at
okay.
a disadvantage going up in this topic against a psych major. Please continue.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, which would make me even argue that, and this is probably where I'll even lose the probably few people that would be on that side on this side is, I would even argue in a case of like Guild Wars 2, while it's been great and all of like introducing players and like kind of take them in that slower pace of, like I said, the open world's more like that parallel play because you don't have to fight for resources. You don't have to get the last kill or be in a group so you get that last kill credit experience. It allows for that parallel play that hopefully if you watch that GDC video, hopefully transitions into maybe forming a guild, because even when they're showing those loner types, the majority of them were like basically there to establish until they get a guild, which makes me think that the single player experience shouldn't be a long-term goal for people in MMOs. But it's funny that even with the introduction of raids, I think we got the LFG thing first. My question would be kind of going back to this whole parallel versus actual cooperative play. I would question if the majority of people that pug raids or even dungeons are they really even technically in this situation cooperatively playing together? How often do you go into a dungeon and change the way you play because of the makeup of the other characters or the other players? Or do
To
you
be
just run
honest,
your same build over and over again?
I haven't gone into a dungeon in forever.
Or fractals or any group content for that matter. And that's a question for even chat or anything like that is and I mean nowadays it's like, and I remember this and wow, it's like, and now, and it's always that link this thing so we don't have to explain it to you, we don't have to communicate with you. People don't want to communicate with one another, so they're not really working together, so they're basically, you figure out your strategy, bring it to the table of someone who already figured out how to play cooperatively. So in reality, I feel like the only people that play the MMO, at least in Guild Wars 2 and raids and stuff, are the people that are figuring out these, what is it, snow crows and stuff, that are figuring out these builds that work together. But you see pugs, they're like, we want to this kind of mesmer, nothing else. You know, it's like,
Right.
but if you have a group of friends, and that I think, and they do stress this in the video, is trying to find your type of guild. And I think that's the thing. If you can find a good group of people that are like, hey, let's just take whatever we have and work off of each other. Now that is truly multiplayer cooperative playing. I feel like pugging and majority of raids nowadays is just parallel playing. You bring your stuff to the table. If it doesn't work, I mean, people just, this group is crap, and leave. It's like,
There's been I'm a tank at heart. I played as a tank through most of World of Warcraft, and I'll admit I tend to change my play behavior mostly because I come from a tanking slash supportive role, so I'm used to making that jump. But yeah, I kind of get that. Is that it's the collaborative parts where you talk to other people and plan and change things. Um, but at the same time, and this is one of the conversations I had with Royby a little bit in the last episode. Um, Part of the MMO experience is the social aspect of it. That's just an inherent part because massive multiplayer online, you're technically like very much wanting to put a lot of people together, and
mhm.
that ability to choose when to interact with everyone around you is the same as any other social setting for humans. Like that's just, you need,
Yeah.
and ever, like, no one can interact with other people 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my wife and I have joked that sometimes we're just roommates. It's just
Waiting for something to get thrown at you.
she might throw something at her computer because her computer is deciding that it wants her to use WordPad instead of Microsoft Word for some reason tonight, and I don't know what else it's going to do.
Oh, lovely.
But it's there are just ebbs and flows in the ways people interact with others. So you kind of can't get rid of the ability to play a game entirely, because what if someone wants to be in this world that they're building?
Well, and
Like,
and
they're
that's
building
why
a
I
presence
initially
in.
said I don't ever expect them to say totally remove solo player content, because even EQ that was predominantly focused on group play, even for farming purpose, like just general grinding farming purposes, it was better to do as a group. But because yeah, solo play, you could consider solo content being, if you go out there and kill a guy at the very beginning, there's solo content right there. You didn't need anyone else. It's like, to ever say remove all solo content, that would kind of be foolish. That's why I'm saying to minimize the focus that gets dumped into solo content. I mean, we had SWOTOR that dumped in massive amounts for their story, had great story.
Uh, uh, I think I was talking to a friend of mine. He called it an MSORPG, massive single player online RPG.
Yeah, and when I went free to play, I know a lot of people that are just like, definitely play it to do the stories, and it's like, and that shows. It's like an MMO it's very tough to be successful. I mean, it was very rocky until they went free to play and really just made you open up your wallet. But it was, you know, like they were so sure that no one was going to reach the end game content. And it was like, what, not even a month in, and people were like, so what's next? And like, wait, what?
It's one of the things that kind of bugs me on both sides is one, developers assume that any amount of content is going to last for any amount of time unless it is
Mhm.
inherently designed to be like super grindy. And two, the people who marathon content for 20 plus hours a day and then complain that there's no new content.
Yeah,
It's like you're not the one that they're developing this timeline for.
yeah,
Stop
exactly.
it.
It's you're not the norm.
But I mean, like you're talking about going out and farming. I'm talking about like the game still has to have a minimum amount of engaging things that a person can do by themselves. So it's yeah, you can go out and you can do some farming. I'm talking like I've complained at length about the home instance on Talking Scrit in Guild Wars 2 to take the example.
Mm.
I want it and they kind of did this with the recent story update with Sun's Refuge where it's kind of a single player instance that you can build up. Having something that you can expand upon and make your own, which is kind of why I wanted them to use the guild hall system so that people could build their own unique Sun's Refuge. Having something to call your own is a cool thing. Like the thread in the most active thread in the MMO Champion Guild Wars 2 sub forum is the character screenshot thread because
Mhm.
fashion wars is a thing. Like, and you know, you with fashion frame and Warframe, it's like it's a huge deal.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it's one of those things where it's like you still need some kind of meaningful thing to do on your own because sometimes you want to play the game that you love, but you don't want to deal with other people right now. So you either suck it up and deal with people, or you let go of playing the thing that you wanted to play. And in that case, like that things kind of fall flat on both of those choices. Now, I'm not saying that every single MMO needs a finely tailored, narrative driven single player experience. Honestly, I find Guild Wars 2 to be particularly compelling because it gives power to the individual where most MMOs don't, but there's a bit of suspension of disbelief in that. But that's more a discussion on narrative design and not necessarily single player versus multiplayer like we're doing here.
Hmm.
So, in a general sense, I do think Guild Wars 2 does focus a great deal on enabling a person to play adjacent, probably a little too much. But
Yeah, that's my one worry is especially with Guild Wars 2, starting to think about the playing adjacently or actual feeding off of one another is I think that was another thing that maybe irritated me about raids of I don't think people were truly prepared for. And like I said, I still would argue with people, and I know a lot of the hardcore raiders that pug, which I think is an oxymoron. Uh, maybe a hardcore pugger. I don't know. But if you're just going there with your build in mind that's supposed to work and you're fitting this template, you're not playing with one another. You're playing next to one another in
you're
order
you're
to complete this.
you are fulfilling a mechanical function, not necessarily a collaborative function.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know if I've ever mentioned it, but it was I think back in Burning Crusades leading up to Lich King, we joked around that like Blizzard was monitoring my account because they made Death Knights after my warrior because I was in a group that we knew each other so well. I took in my like Fury warrior or what I had a two-hander. I don't know what the correct build would have been at that time. So sorry if someone out there is like, it's not Fury, it's
That would have been
I,
arms, but yeah.
arms. Okay. But I basically put in defensive stance and would use my taunt. And we had like one of the other people that had like kind of their like little taunt thing. We would basically trade off
You
you
were
know,
soft tanking
tough.
on an arms warrior.
Yeah.
Bravo. I dig it.
And yeah, it's just one of those things where, and I feel like that's where those memories come from, and of we literally had to work together
Doing
instead
the
of,
weird shit. Yeah.
yeah, instead of just, no, this is my build, this is how I move, like this is how I'm, I hit 2 3 3 4 1 1 2 3 3 4 1, it's like,
If you could create a key button macro of your rotation and hand that and your character off to any individual and they could do just as well as you, then it's mechanical, not collaborative. Is that what that's basically what you're saying?
yes, like,
Okay.
I mean, and I know I kind of still say it's not enough when on talking script, when people bring up the people that do, like, that say like, oh, raids can't be done by anyone, because look, the high tier raiders that took all druids or all necros or all,
Teapot's 10-man necros squad,
yes,
whatever he
like
was
there,
saying,
there's been a
necros were
couple out
trash.
there that have done different ones, and it's like no, they know each other, know how to play together, and know how to work with each other. You take 10, you take 10 people with 10 necros, it's not going to work like that. They have to know one another.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a collaborative effort. And that's honestly one of the things where I kind of agree that I don't think a lot of people in Guild Wars 2 who weren't familiar with raiding from other games weren't necessarily ready for raiding
Yeah.
as it is. Um, that is to say, I do think Guild Wars 2 raiding is probably the best because you're not allowed to play the UI.
And I'm getting rinsed in the polls.
Well, I honestly think it's the primary aspect is having that palate cleanser of being in a game that you love and not having to deal with people when you choose not to deal with people. So I think that's more it.
And doesn't anyone just AFK in the town anymore? Yeah, exactly.
I, we've both talked about how many hours on our account are probably attributed to just running around Lion's Arch while talking on Discord.
Yeah. Oh, and chat's saying Fallout 76. Yeah, I personally haven't had a chance to try the. I know
Well,
the beta just ended on the consoles, but
I part of me hope I'm gonna say it here. Part of me hopes it fails, but yeah, I said it, and I'm gonna publish this on YouTube later, and I don't care what kind of comments I get. Um, but just I think that's my sole stance on it is just being able to be in the world you love and have some kind of engaging content for just you, and then having like not the whole game. Like, and honestly, I think Guild Wars 2 does give a little too much solo content for an MMO. As much as I enjoy the story, like I love the Guild Wars 2 story, it's fantastic. But
Mhm.
you have to be able to make that choice because sometimes you're just not. You need to be in your MMO, but you need to not be dealing with people.
True, and
So,
like I said, that's why I'm not saying wipe out all of solo content, but I would like to see the shift go back to actually having a group actually meaning something. Because I mean, and I think you've dealt with this. I'm sure a lot of people out there have, of especially with Guild Wars 2 and a lot of the games that are now, a lot of MMOs that are now shifting to, you can have multiple guilds. It is so hard to have a meaningful guild.
I was not a fan of that when I found that out about Guild Wars 2.
It, it's basically a glorified playlist or friends list, because it's like people will come up with guilds. It's like, and there's a lot of handy guilds out there, of the sense of, oh, the ones that made the, NA and EU pugging rating guilds, like that is helpful, but that is just a glorified playlist. If we were able to make playlists, or not playlists, friends lists, if we were able to have a more robust friends list and make categories, that would achieve the same thing.
Basically, different chat, like custom chat channels, and be like, okay, this is the amateur raiding party chat channel.
Yeah.
It's like someone's like, hey, I'm throwing together a raid. Who wants to join? And you get the little
Yeah, I
pop-up.
mean, other games have done that, where it's like, yeah, you want a separate chat window for X amount of friends. So yeah, you could have a non-official guild type thing, or a, like you're saying, a friends list thing of just all these raider, like pool of raiders that are ready to go, that you wouldn't need that. So
Yeah.
like, so while it's useful, it's it could be done in other ways, and I feel cheapens guilds, and that I feel that's the same for ESO as well, because I think they allow 5 guilds or something as well. But
Yeah.
and yeah, for me, being the type of person that had to run the guild, having people show up for stuff like that, and it's just one of those tough things where I feel like it's always been easier when it was like, wow, you have one guild. EQ, you had one guild. There was a sense of loyalty to that, which spurred the, well, I'm here with these people, I need to play, you know, play with them, play through multiplayer, strengthen the multiplayer.
Oh man, Fenris, good luck. Good luck. Let me know how far you get into it. I believe in you.
He walked away, he might already be dead and be over.
Well, if he paused, the game is a single player, so Outlast 2 has a pause button. But a permadeath run in Outlast 2 just sounds like ugh. But I think that's probably a good sign to say that we've run out our arguments here. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you on YouTube, I want to hear your comments in the comments down below. The poll will be in the description. Also, the link to the GDC talk that spurred this entire thing between me and Dayo will be available. And I've been your host, Malthanis. You can find me on Twitter at MalthanisMMO, and here on the Mad Realms Twitch channel, twitch.tv/MadRealms. That's 2 A's in the Mad. This channel goes live at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays, Eastern Standard Time, for Vote to Kick. And then we do some Guild Wars 2 shenanigans after the fact. I believe Dayo will be joining me this evening. You can find him at simply_Dayo on Twitch and Twitter and YouTube. I think you have a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I don't use it that much, so that's why I usually tell people Twitch and Twitter.
Okay, Twitch, Twitter.
I mean, granted, I don't use the Twitch as much either, but I'm trying to correct that.
Yeah. But, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all have a fantastic evening, and I will see you next time. Good night.
Take care, everyone. Bye.